Doing awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
Oh, Kristen, I have done so much 3D printing stuff lately.
hmm
How about you?
Me too. I printed off so many magical girls. Um, Roberto and Adam, so Twin Goddess and
Mm-hmm.
Marshawn. I can't say it, but Magical Girl Assault is his game. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
I printed off a ton of those for paint workshops, and along with some just other standard D&D stuff, and did a painting workshop this weekend, and it was
Ooh,
super fun.
painting workshop.
Yeah,
Tell me how that went.
it did really well. I
Mm-hmm.
actually had five first time students, never painted minis more than just a little bit in their lives. And then I had probably about twice that many people come through and just kind of pop in and out during the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I totally taught them slap chop, and I have no shame.
Yes, yes. Did you call it slap chop and
I
everything?
did, I did, and you know what? We went through, and I brought a bunch of black primed minis, but cool barometer check. Over half of the people already had their own 3D printed mini for their characters with them, and I was so stoked. That was like a whole seismic shift in like a game experience for me. Like that people just would walk in and bring that, their custom. One of them was a hero click or hero click hero forge
Here, Forge.
prefab, and then two of them were just kind of a. I think one of them was somebody just liked the file, and then the other one was actually built. Like it was built from kit. Like their friend was a like I would call it probably like a um, kit bash, right? Like it was definitely pieced together out of a couple different sets, but it looked good, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So then I also gave them a whole bunch of like Yanti and stuff because they wanted to learn. And I had everybody, I was like, okay, we have 2 hours. You're going to do at least 2 minis during 2 hours. And everybody was like, but it was slap chop. And so like I was done with my demo models in like 35 minutes, and then just got to kind of go around and, kind of help people out and show them what they were doing. And people really want to go hard on the dry brushing, especially when they get to the white. They just want to like go. I'm like, no, just chill out. But then, you still kind of got to keep the color value right if you want like a bright PC versus a creepy monster or so. But yeah, it was super fun. It was down at Legendarium bookstore in downtown Salt Lake,
Mm-hmm.
and great folks. Um, and I'll probably do it again in a couple months.
I'm really wanting to host a paint night at my local store too, so I'm gonna be bugging you about logistics. Like, let's talk about logistics. Like, how'd
hmm
you just go like, hey, game store, I want to do a paint
Um,
night. How does this
I've
work?
because I've published, they kind of known that I've been kind of like lurking around as a, we'll say professional, semi-professional. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
D-list professional. Anyway, and they just kept asking about subject matter. And someone said, "Hey, didn't you also have that print podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, we do print podcasts." And that's somebody listened to a couple episodes, and they were like, "Hey, would you actually come down and like do a thing?" And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Hell yeah, we'll do a thing." And I partnered with Adam and Alberto, and then I also just got some free files from that anybody could get off my mini factory. Nothing for sale that wasn't given full blessing for use. And I printed that up. I printed, I want to say it was only 4 trays, but it ended up being like well over 60 or 70 minis. Uh, and just had so many things for people to pick out.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to get most classes. I also tried to get some unusual combinations, like dragonkin artificer type dudes, and just
Mm-hmm.
things you don't normally see. And then I of course had all the magical girls, which those magical girl salt minis would totally work. There's one of them that's one of the best ice wizard mods that I've ever seen, by the way, models. But yeah, so the actual logistics of what I did though. um,
Mm-hmm.
Dollar store was my friend. I went and got the cheapest makeup brushes I could find in like there was a clearance sale at one of them like a CVS or something, and then I went to the dollar store. Ended up with about 12 makeup brushes. I tried to get 3 different sizes so that they could do a dark gray, a light gray, and a white. Um,
Mm-hmm.
had that all set up. I had one speed paint kit from Army Painter. That's all I had. I kept all my personal paints off to the side. and just had them. I went through the demo. I did a lich and I did the ice mage.
Mm-hmm.
We covered it's in a bookstore. You want to get me nervous? I used to work in a bookstore, and I was fastidious about getting anything liquid near my books. That would have freaked me out. But these people were super cool, and they just unfolded trash bags over all their tables and tied it all down and gave us a painting surface. And we used paper plates as our palettes. There's a whole paper plate crew trending over on TikTok if you're bored and want to see some cute mini painting videos. It's not just our workshop that did it, but had the paper plates, had the cheapy dollar store brushes. I hit my prints all with just base Army Painter black. Had everybody use, a couple different choices of mid-tones and got that white up, did the paint up, and then just kind of showed them how to use speed paints on it. And I have to say, like, some of the best looking first miniatures I've ever seen painted, because it's just so easy. It's great.
This is a great technique for it too, because Slapchop does result in a great looking mini real quick and with like a modicum of skill involved. That early success is going to make people want to paint more, whereas I've seen it the other way around, where like you're teaching their first mini and like it looks like that Space Marine meme that goes around where the eyes on the side of the head and stuff, and they just get so discouraged and don't want to continue the hobby. And I'm like, no, brush control and practice, this is all stuff that takes time in minis, but you can get stuff that looks just fine on the tabletop with no dedication of skill and stuff like that.
And I always was telling them, hey, yeah, you can try to do a pupil if you really want to, but can you see that from 4 feet away? It's like, if you can't see it from 4 feet away, like I had one of my overachievers, I think her name was Sarah. She did buttons on the coat.
Oh wow!
And went that far in. First mini ever did copper buttons. I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. But
we've got some people in chat I want to shout out to. We got David, Alex, and James. Welcome to the show. If you have any questions for us, feel free to ask. We do know that you all love to ask your questions.
Someone says you're a little bit quiet, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, I'll fix that.
You are a lot less quiet now. I will do. But yeah, I think there's enough things going on in the community to get sad about, that we doing things like this. We should embrace the fact that it is an awesome experience to get that first solid mini out there. Actually, in this case, everybody had 2 of them. Even the people who didn't think they could do 2. I had one guy left a half hour early, but he still got 1 done. And it just, I was so impressed. And people who didn't think they could paint a monster, got there and were picking out the scales on the Yuan-ti, and I was like, it was so good. Anyway, what did you do?
Awesome. Well, I had a couple of projects that I had this week. First project is real simple. I don't have any pictures to show for them, but finally printed up the Sister Squad and got that delivered to the younger sibling.
Okay.
And we're having fun with that.
When you say Sister Squad, do you mean like Battle Sisters?
Yes, Battle Sisters. OPR's Battle Sisters, actually.
Sweet.
To do some Grimdark Future Firefight, so the skirmish scale game, and like I mentioned last week, my Custodes squad is tiny. Like the Sister Squad is like 8 models. There's a guard squad that's like 15 models because humans are cheap. And then there's like my Custodian squad, which is literally 3 of the basic infantry. That's it. That's all I can afford. That's it. That's the whole army.
That's okay. I would just have 2 big bugs on the board. Or maybe a bunch of demons.
Or just 3 big demons. You have to have 3.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the
You have to have 3? Okay.
Yeah, because you can't spend more than a third of your points on a single model.
Can I make them all wizards?
Yes, you can.
Or psychics, I guess, in the future.
Because you're allowed to have up to 3 wizards. So, yes, all 3 of them may be wizards.
Yes.
And you mentioned palettes. This is my favorite palette.
Yeah. Was that an index card? What is it? Oh no,
No,
it's a tile. It's a tile. You
it is
told me
a
this.
it is literally a white ceramic tile from the hardware store that cost me 50 cents. And I've got fancy palettes. I do use a wet palette. But 90% of the time, if I'm just slapping some minis together, I grab this in my best Duncan Rhodes impression. And and also it's like the easiest thing to clean in the world. I just get a
Yeah, I'm
sponge and rub
sure.
it off.
Well, and a quick thing about wet palettes. Wet palettes are great if you're doing blending, if you're doing like a long thing, but it's kind of ridiculous if you're doing slap chop because you're gonna be in and out of there.
Yeah, and also like speed paint and contrast paint don't work good on wet palette anyway
Right.
because it
Yeah.
messes up the balance.
Balance of them.
Their
And
medium is resin based, not water based, and so by introducing water into the equation, you're kind of screwing with the
well,
formula.
as we know, you don't put water on them later either, so that makes sense.
Which brings me to my other success story, which is after finishing up the werewolves, I then went around and finished up a couple of models here and there to finish up some squads, and I now have my undead army complete.
Please say you have pictures of it because I saw
I
those
do.
pictures and it is beautiful. It is a thing to behold, folks.
Yeah, I am super happy with this one. And so this makes my second 2,000 point army that I've painted fully, with the first being my elf army. And I am so happy to have this project. This was a lot of work, a whole lot of time. I'm not super into undead. I just like I'm not the kind of guy who wants to paint all the skulls and the evilness and stuff, but it's like I needed a bad guy army because we can't just have all the good guys fighting each other all the time. And also the undead army would be great fodder for every single game I play, but whether it be Pathfinder or Rangers of Shadow Deep or whatever. I used those zombies in Rangers of Shadow Deep, and I used almost all the zombies. So like, it's a great army for a role player to have because you're going to want zombies, you're going to want skeletons, you're going to want elite versions of both of those things, you're going to want vampires, you're going to want werewolves. Right. And yeah, it's like, and part of me is like, was a great way to go forward with it. And my favorites of the army, first, the army is almost entirely 3D printed. There are 2 models in the entire army that are not 3D printed. The first is most obvious, which is I'm using Games Workshop's Vampire Lord on Undead Dragon.
Okay, I was wondering.
And that was only because back then there just weren't a lot of great options available for 3D printing when I bought it, which is why I resulted into buying it. But boy, yeah, today there are so many options. I would not have bought this model back if I had these options that I have today. And
I have a question for you when you get a second. Printed. Sorry.
And the second one is just this little wolf that's attached to the skeleton squad, and that's because it was a very last minute addition of 10 points that I needed to round out the 2,000 points. And I was like, okay, I need 10 points somewhere. What can I do? The necromancer can have a wolf companion. So I just went to my shelf of painted miniatures and grabbed my wolf, grabbed a wolf and threw it in there. So this is all hand painted by me. And I'm real proud of it. Mission accomplished.
So how many companies am I looking at in terms of
so the zombies are Highland Miniatures zombies because they have one of the best zombie sets out there, because it comes in 2 packages, civilians and soldiers, and when you mix those in, you have like 14 different poses, unique models, and the command line unit for the front, which there are not a lot of zombies that have a command rank. So they've got like a town crier with a bell to be your musician, like a big executioner zombie to be your sergeant, and this zombie crawling on the ground with a flag literally impaling him to the ground to be your flag bearer. And it's just such a great set. It's one of my favorite zombie sets. So that's what I'm using there. Those are from Highland Miniatures. The werewolves, which are probably my best painted minis in this collection, were from Cast and Play. I've talked about those in the past on the show.
Right.
The skeletons are all from Artisan Guild, from their Citizens of Oldburg line, and just because they look so good, and part of me wishes I had just gone with like the most bare bones bony boys with no armor on to do for my basic skeletons, because these all have like town guard armor on. But they just look so dang cool. I had to
They
do
do
it.
look
But it
good.
does mean that they took longer to paint, because skeletons are like the most quintessential easy army to paint in the world. You just prime white, put earth shade on it, done.
Yeah.
And I went with one where I'm doing like OSL and armor and non-metallic metal swords. And it's just like, why did I choose this for a horde unit? So there are 20 of those with swords and shields from Artisan Guilds. I love it. That's a completely modular kit too, just like most
Yep.
of the Artisan Guild stuff. The necromancer that's leading that skeleton horde is from Heresy
Okay.
model, and I love it. The bats in the background, the giant bats, are from the second vampire set from Artisan Guild.
Okay.
And I didn't print the saddles. I just printed them as giant bats because I wanted giant bat beasts.
Yep.
Because it's one of my favorite. I just love the idea of big, gigantic, like 20 feet wingspan bats as an enemy that you have to
That would
fight.
be horrifying.
Right in front of them are 3 more giant bats, but of the more just like human-sized giant bats. Those are from Titan Forge,
Okay.
and they're just there to be a screen, just to get in the way. And finally, the vampire knights, the blood knights, are from Orc King, which is they were the first to get a good blood knight set out back in the day, and so I printed it up. Fun fact, back then, like the scaling was all wonky. Like they had like millimeters instead of meters, so like they were like literally 100 times too small, so they had to be rescaled and custom supported. That was back in the dark days before pre-supported models existed.
Right. Right.
And so that was a lot of custom work to get those put together. And I had fun with those because that was the unit that I did 100% dry brushing on, because I was learning different painting techniques. So I was like, I'm going to do an entire unit of vampires using nothing but dry brushing.
Right. Right. David's already beat me to my punchline here. I just wanted to know what we were looking at, because when you take them in the way you've painted them and use that color scheme, especially with that underglow to unify it all, it looks like it all goes. And I think that's amazing, because that's what at least 5 or 6 companies you knocked off there, not counting GW, and it all feels so together, and it's very impressive.
Yeah, I'm glad that I also did get to use so many companies, because I like supporting a lot of the 3D printing world, and it's all too easy to just get locked down on a project and like be sitting there waiting for months and months and months for the unit you want or the models you want to get printed by one of the companies.
The other half of the army to come out from the one person you're using.
Yeah. And it's super satisfying to have it on the table, and I can't wait to. I've already done some 1,000 point games with the Force, and it behaves exactly like I wanted it to. Basically, it's an entire bunch of trash that just goes forward and bogs down everything, and then the vampires hit, and everything dies when the vampires hit.
Nice. David's other question here, what's next? 2K future, third future, 3K points. What do you know yet? Or are you just kind of taking the breath of your success and still are regathering?
This army actually has about another 1,000 points in painted models that aren't on the table.
Aha!
So they've already made it to 3,000 points, because the Artisan Guild vampires on foot, I painted those up for the army, but
I thought I saw them.
List.
Yeah, okay.
And I have a bunch of hero vampires and warlocks and an entire squad of ghouls and a ghoul king. And like there's some other models that just didn't.
That's right. You have those ghouls that look like the Pathfinder ones with the crazy tongues, don't you?
Yeah. And so they've been fun. What next is my rat army.
Oh, that's
I'm
right.
going to be printing a Ratman, the one-page rules Ratman, so that they're all dashing and valiant and defending the world from the evils of the warp demons, and we're going to be having some fun with those. So that is what's next for me on as far as
Evils.
giant projects.
Evils of
Smallest
the warp
projects is
demon.
I'm going to paint my custodian army, which should take me an afternoon.
They just want you to understand the depth of their passion. It's not evil. It's just different. I was going to say, are you going to
So,
use the clay cyanide mini mice also in your army?
I do not know what I'm going to use because
Because
some
those
stuff is
are
still coming.
adorable.
They are absolutely crazy adorable, and I'm definitely going to buy them. I don't know if they'll make it into the rat project or not. I've already printed like 60 rats for that project.
I see.
So 2 groups of 20 warriors and a whole bunch of support models, and I'm definitely wanting to go very elite heavy in this one because I do not want because I know what happens when you go horde heavy with Ratman, and the answer is you end up painting rats for the rest of your life, and you never finish because there are 3,000 of the darn things.
Well,
Hello,
they
Joseph.
they just die though.
I mean, yes, it is a great effective strategy to just literally flood the field with rodents, but I really like, I want to get a whole squad of rat ogres on the field, and I want to get like a big old bale and all those weird freaking equipment. I want all that stuff on the field. And lots of warlocks and engineers making all the craziness happen. And I am doing a little bit of a horde. Like I said, I've already got 60 rats that are just
Right.
infantry. And now and that gets me to almost 400 points.
So in that clean, nice boy look that the OPR rat people have, do they have rat ogres?
uh I have to stop talking right now because I don't know what's been announced and what's not been announced.
I see.
Disclaimer, I work for OPR, so I have to shut up at the moment. Though that has been helpful to be able to just get a little bit of a head start of a couple of weeks ahead of releases.
Yeah, I bet.
And the tabletop guys here. Hello.
Hello.
So that's my project. Oh, the other project I've been at. So I told you one of my friends, member of my gaming group, also named Chris, got a 3D printer and has been
Oh,
getting really into 3D printing now,
nice.
which is fun, but from a completely different angle. So I got to dive into the non-gaming 3D printing because we worked together on a project called a word clock. Do you know
Oh,
what a word clock is?
no.
Okay. So a word clock is where it's a clock when you look on the wall. It doesn't have numbers. It literally I'm going to pull one up here. This is not the one we 3D printed. Because it was all custom designed, and I don't have permission from him to show it, so I'm not going to throw pictures of it up. But instead of like the numbers, it literally lights up various letters on a giant grid so that it actually says it is 5 minutes past 11.
Oh, okay.
So a Raspberry Pi was involved, and I mostly served as emotional support and knowledge base on this project. I wanted to be more involved. I even printed and failed. It was 2 print fails actually for the project, where the faceplate, because I have a Saturn and it was big enough to get the faceplate, whereas he only has a Photon, so it's like a
Gotcha.
small printer. But we managed to get it printed on his FDM printer, which is an Ender 3 Pro, which is a glorious printer.
Okay.
So basically, we designed up the CAD. We designed up the case, and the faceplate, and punched in all the numbers, and we also he did all the programming work, and so that was all on him. So like a Raspberry Pi lives in it, and it's all programmed up to light up the right letters at all the right times. And the version that he designed also has like, it is a holiday. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day
Oh,
is on
wow.
it, and all sorts of stuff. So it's like twice as wide as the one I'm showing off here from Sharper Image.
Gotcha.
And it's great. It's a wonderful little fun project, and it was fun to get involved in the geeky engineering side of 3D printing. And so my role on it was like, I had to show him how to use Blender. I had to show him how to consider what needs to be printed, and like how to prep things for the 3D printing, and how to take a grid that he designed in Photoshop and convert that into a 3D object, and then to clean up all the badness that happens when you do that. And like, there were versions of this where it was all inside out and broken and
Right.
troubleshooting, and it was just fun. It was
So
absolutely fun.
was it two different types of, like, was it resin letters that you put in there, or like?
And ultimately, the whole thing ended up being FDM printed in the end,
Okay.
because we couldn't get a successful print of the faceplate because he wanted it like 1 millimeter thin,
Oh,
which is not great for resin. I mean, you can
especially if
do
there's
it,
warping and stuff.
but just getting it off the support snapped it twice.
Mm.
And I wanted to print it at like 3 millimeters or 2 millimeters. And eventually we would have, but he got a good FDM success on it. And so, like, yeah, project done. Case designed, everything. The fun part was like designing up a bracket on the inside to like hold screws and bolts in place so that the Raspberry Pi could be mounted inside the case next to the daughter board that controls the display so that the two can connect and talk to each other. And so like, it wasn't just like as simple as design a box. It was okay, grab your calipers. These are M2 screws, and so they need to have this much of a bore to buy into an FDM plastic. And it is 82.5 millimeters from this screw to this screw. So we need to space out the joining bracket so that it accommodates for this. And it's this tall, and we need to snake around this capacitor. So we have to make a cutout. And it was really fun to get really down in the weeds and with this design work.
I am glad you enjoyed that.
And it was really easy. I got to do my Edastrudes and my Esta snails, and it was wonderful.
Not my jam, but I'm impressed anyway. I would have probably gone and got snacks. That would have been my help for that project. Here are your snacks.
Yeah. And we got another project we're going to be working on soon. We are already working on 3D printing vertical windmills.
Like, for real?
Electricity. To make
Okay.
electricity.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would need some pretty big prints for that.
I mean, nothing that won't fit on well, that won't fit on the Neptune.
Alex gets it in one.
Sounds like a certifiable nightmare to me. Oh, Alex, this is I really love getting, like, honestly, the reason I like 3D printing is because it was just yet another one of these projects. But I pick up these hobbies and projects left and right, and they deep dive into them, from like leather working to building model rockets. And I don't mean buying a kit. I mean boring out metal, and like all sorts of fun stuff.
While I too am a slave to hyperfixation, I have
Yes,
realistic
yes,
limits.
it's wonderful. Chase the high, embrace it. It was like that whole 2.5 years where we like designed up hydroponic farms to grow stuff in a basement, and it was like, hey, we're managing to grow about 1.5 acres worth of tomatoes in 2 buckets.
You might get me there because I do enjoy gardening, so that would be.
It's like gardening with tech.
Yeah. We're talking about doing our own starters this year. That's as far as we're going so far, but
And it's fun to remember that as much as we love gaming with these 3D printers, they are incredibly powerful tools that you can do to make all sorts of crazy things. Did I talk on the show about being hired uh, by Owen's crew?
No,
Oh,
I don't
I'm allowed to
think.
talk about this now. The
Okay.
cookie cutters.
Oh, you did mention there were cookie cutters coming for kaiju thing.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's the other thing. I'm going to be designing up the cookie cutters for Gingerbread Kaiju, a little board game where you bake cookies in gingerbread, but they're monster shaped, and you do battle with them, and then you eat them.
Do
And
you
so
eat them when they're defeated, or do you eat your opponents when
I
you
am
win?
not sure. They said make a freaking kaiju cookie cutters, and I was like, I'm in.
You had made kaiju.
It's going to be wonderful. I'm going to have so much fun.
That's cool. Is that going to be a Kickstarter, or do you know what's the
It's
situation?
going to be a Kickstarter, I believe, in a couple of months. So
Sweet.
I'll definitely be shouting out to that project as it comes close. And I'm definitely going to have to do a lot of play testing of
Mm.
this.
Of all those cookies, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get bonuses if they're frosted? It's like armor class increase.
Oh, so that's what we've been up to. Have you got anything else you've been up to?
Well, I've been slowly meandering towards some sort of sci-fi army, but
Ooh.
I'm still like, because of course I can always repurpose chaos stuff for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I might do a robots. Not. I can't believe it's not Necrons,
I love. I can't believe it's not Catrons.
but there's been a lot of really cool minis coming out for that, so I might play around with that.
Not going to use the chibi Necrons from last
Well,
episode.
yeah, maybe now that I have them, I didn't expect that, but I
I
did.
am surprised at the chibi explosion because
It was like
right
right after
after
that
the episode, like
episode.
I think it was announced in the middle of the episode because I saw some weird comments popping up across chat at the end, and I was like, "What?" So we mentioned that Capsule Chibi and Grimdark Cuteness was like kind of unique in the space, in that they're doing chibi gaming stuff. Well, evidently Titan Forge wants in on this
Apparently,
chibi cuteness. They're launching an entire campaign dedicated just to making chibi gaming characters. So like, for anybody who doesn't know what chibi is, it's like the really big heads on the little stubby bodies. Um, the Super Dungeon Explorer is like a game that uses that. There's also, it's called Super Deformed in other cultures, or SD is another phrase for it. But big old head, tiny little body, kind of like a pop figure, but with more detail.
right. I was about to say
Instead of just
kind of
that one face that all the pop figures
the
have.
pop figures have, Although that one face kind of makes them cool, like makes them work. David, I might do Tyranids. He said I would have guessed not Tyranids. I do love me some Tyranids as well, but I think I'll
And
do like
plus, you've got
skirmish for them.
you've been collecting those.
Hmm.
Wild meshes. You've been geeking about wild meshes. I can't believe they're not Tyranids. And also, we've both been drooling over Puppets Wars, not
Hmm.
Tyranids.
It's true. It's true. And then there's I think it's Dominance Frontier that's going on. Although for some reason they all have very suggestive, very female human anatomy elements in their builds, but they look
Mm.
really neat. But I'm still a little curious about that. Why they're
It
there.
does seem. I would not be comfortable with that at all, actually.
But some of them look really neat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And then there's probably not the ones you'll go for, but there are the OPR Alien Hive
I do like some of this.
option.
I like their psychic bug things. Their
Mhm.
floaters. Those are neat. Um,
Gamic has like one of the best. This really meant for Gene Stealer cults more than Tyranids,
mhm.
but like the hive mind dude that's supposed to be like the one controlling the Gene Stealer cult on the planet. I forget what the name of that model is supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
but the Gamic has one that's like instead of the weird pose that GW gave the character, like it actually is on a throne and it's seething and it's like, yeah, that's that. That is the leader of a resistance movement.
Yeah. So Alex says, what not orcs? The orc I'm excited for is not a mini. It is.
Yes, that does bring us into the conversation. So, a couple of episodes ago, we talked about what D&D was trying to do with the OGL. And then a whole bunch of stuff happened, and you probably have heard about it. But to sum it up very quickly, as first the D&D part, and then why orcs are awesome. They do seem to have retreated on many of their points and have very much changed their tune from one, not saying anything at all, which is what they did at first, which
Mm-hmm.
was weird,
Yes.
to one of the worst press releases we've ever read, which ended in the phrase, uh, they have won and so have we. Um, I'm not going to get into it,
Yes.
but
There's a lot of stuff
very
out there.
bad.
Go YouTube it. Go
Yeah.
Google it.
Yeah.
It's sad making if you're a creator like I am, but at the same point, unless they don't keep OGO 10A, a lot of us are going to be sad and some of us are going to lose
Right.
business. But
This has resulted in an absolute explosion in the creator sphere.
yes.
Kobold Press announced they're going to do their own game. There was another
Mhm.
crew that said that as well. There's three crews that have announced it
DM
already.
Dave,
DM Dave,
MCDM is also doing one.
MCDM,
Obviously,
Kobold Press.
Paizo's already there. Owen Casey Stevens is doing one called Warbrand.
Right.
And they all share something in common. Literally.
Yes. Also, Fantasy Age 2, second
Yes.
edition's coming out.
But I don't think that needs the orc support.
No, but it's in there anyway.
But it is in there, yes. And Fantasy
And
Age already is a good game. But
well, you're talking about the orc, which is so the fact that there needs to be this giant open license that everything was gathered under, and allows for like this giant cross pollination of ideas and support and third party production. And the reason that the entire RPG gaming sphere has grown as much as it has over the past 2 decades, just because WotC might kill it doesn't mean we don't need it. And so Paizo and a bunch of companies have teamed up to release the Open RPG Creative License. It's not out yet. They are working on it. And it is trying to be what the OGL was supposed to be, which is truly open, irrevocable, and they're going to be putting it in the hands of a third-party nonprofit that none of the companies control, so that nobody can do these shenanigans again. And more than 1,500 publishers have signed on in support of the org. You have also signed on in support of the org.
I have.
I am not a publisher, so I didn't sign on in support of the org, but I'm cheering it from the sidelines.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what turns out, but hey, it's going to be a really cool time to explore new games, new concepts, challenge some preconceived stuff, play some other genres. It's going to be good stuff. And I don't know, do we have time to talk about some of our favorites that are out there?
Yeah, because I'm kind of going through this myself right now. It's like this whole thing has kind of put a bad taste in my mouth about, because we were about to spin up that Castle Ravenloft game. I talked about it on stream several times.
Oh yeah.
And we were like the game room got cleaned up. We're here. We're playing some Rangers of Shadow Deep to warm up. And the plan was, after we finished up Rangers, we were going to do a hard pivot right into 5th edition, not even 5th edition. We were going to be running the playtest rules to do Castle Ravenloft. And I have the big cool Ravenloft coffin and everything ready to go for that. And now I'm kind of like, I don't sure I want to do that with 5th edition right now. Not with everything in the air. So I'm searching for other game systems. And of course, everybody's going to be like, why not Pathfinder? Especially to me. Reason one, I have played Pathfinder for 15 years. Nonstop, 4 games a week. I love Pathfinder. There's probably very few people on the planet who loves Pathfinder as much as I do. I'm a little tired of Pathfinder. I want to do something different for a little bit. I want to explore other game systems. I will probably come back to Pathfinder and we'll run another 3-year campaign in it because I do love the system so much. But for a little bit, I want to try stuff. And there's a whole lot of people in my shoes right now that want to try something else. Now, if you are in a 5th edition crew and you are wanting to play a game that's very close in feel, do check out Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2. One of those games might be exactly what you're looking for. But
and all the rules content is on free stuff, at least for the time being.
Yeah. But what else is out there besides the blatantly obvious?
Well, we're talking genre. We're staying in fantasy to begin.
Let's say, hey, I'm wanting to get my D&D fix. I'm wanting to stay in the fantasy lane first, and then we'll talk about some of our favorites outside of that.
Okay. I always, have heard a lot of good things about Morkborg. I have played and enjoyed much enjoyment playing Shadows of the Demon Lord.
What is Morkborg?
It's another more gritty.
That is
fantasy.
A weird name.
It is, but it's got a fantasy engine, but it has sub licenses for sci-fi and cyberpunk and the whole nine. It is artistically interesting to me. I have not got a lot of play experience with it. I've just kind of like sat and lurked at some con games. So I would love if we have anybody in chat who wants to talk it up, by all means, if you know anything about it. Obviously, there's things like Blades in the Dark and that whole family. I'm less a fan of that because it is so niche, like about the heist.
Yeah. And let's not super speed through it. So Blades in the Dark is a game about doing heists in a fantasy setting in a city ruled by vampires.
And it has a clock mechanic that people are quite fond of.
Yeah. And it does a really good heist mechanic where you get to pre-plan your heist without actually doing the horrible pre-planning that takes up your whole session. That one contribution to gaming is brilliant.
Yeah. And it has a whole genre set of plugins. I know there's a sci-fi thing and some other stuff there. You were talking right before we started about Savage Worlds and how.
So Savage Worlds is a generic system that is good for all sorts of genres, but it has a very well supported fantasy section. So it has the Fantasy Companion, which is just a second book. First, Savage Worlds is also cheap as crap. It's like the core book is $10. And
they're more like a graphic novel format. They're a little bit smaller, which I think
they're very small.
And easy to travel with.
Yeah, it's a very lightweight system that if you're a D&D player, you'll feel fond of because you're purchasing feats and core stats, and a lot of the core gameplay is very similar. Just roll dice, equal number. The cool thing about Savage World is when you write down your skills and your stats, you don't actually write down a number. You write down the dice you upgraded to. So you roll, like at the weakest end, you're rolling D4s to try to hit your numbers. And at the high end, you're rolling D12s. You're all, as a player character, you're considered a wild card. So you're also always rolling a D6 with those. And they can explode. It has an exploding mechanic, so it's real fun.
I have had that happen on a spell, and that was quite fun.
Yeah, it's a great system. And then they recently licensed Pathfinder First Edition and published this whole gigantic package of how to play a Pathfinder-like game, which basically means it's a very D&D-like way of playing through Savage Worlds with a humongous amount of support. I love. There is a different world in which I hosted a Savage Worlds podcast for 14 years. I love that system so much.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. And another one of my favorite systems, if you're wanting that fantasy buy, is Fantasy Age.
Yeah.
Which was based off the Dragon Age game. Where they put that Green Ronin put out. First, if you get the Dragon Age giant book, it is glorious and wonderful and a great way to play a very dark fantasy
and a
game.
world people have a lot of familiarity with already.
Yeah. And Fantasy Age kind of marvelifies it a little bit. Like you get more stunts. You're going to be very Saturday morning cartoon level fantasy heroes. Basically, it has a cool stunt system where when you roll to succeed, one of the dice is a different color than the other dice you roll. You're always rolling like 3d6, and you can spend the six generates what's called the one that's off color generates what's called stunt points, and
Mm-hmm.
when you get to spend those to do extra stuff on top of the normal action that you were taking. So like if you were attacking, you could spend stunt points to knock them off guard or throw them off balance or trip them and all sorts of fun stuff that you decide on at the moment based on how many stunt points you managed to generate during the action. Which means that you don't just, which prevents what can happen in third edition, where you get like the chain fighter build, where you bought all these feats to do this one thing very, very well, but it just means your character literally does the same thing every turn forever.
Yeah, yeah,
And the stunt system kind of solves
gets
that problem
around that.
because you don't always have the stunt points you need, and what you've got, you basically get a choice of options that you don't control. It's almost as good for that as like some card based RPGs for doing similar kind of things.
Right. And if you're hearing this right now and kind of like, why are you all talking about this? All of the Patreons I'm involved with, almost to a one, currently have their surveys out, and they're asking, hey, what systems do you want us to support? Because they are now becoming aware that the OGL support might be going away. So it's a great
We got a
time.
lot of hate for putting that episode out.
Yeah. But, it's a good time to advocate for the positive and get behind your favorite system with your creators, and maybe get some, collaboration. Not to mention, a lot of these games do have their own unique bestiaries and things. And a lot of the Patreon people are looking for, new series to do, new armies and stuff to get out there. And it's a really exciting time for collaboration and creative inspiration on that front.
Yeah,
Speaking of
MC
which,
4250 even reached out to Paizo and Kobold Press for permission to do their monsters and
nice.
got it. So
Nice.
so if you want a more free 3D printable RPG minis, the very first one hit, which is a Paizo styled football headed goblin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw some chitons too. But I was just going to say, going from that and inspiring into the 3D print space, there are genres of games, beyond the fantasy games that I think we hopefully will see more support for. I think we've already seen a little bit of support for Starfinder.
Right.
I've definitely seen some not Skittermanders out there lurking about. And I don't know if I see any Morlamals.
I've not seen no more Lamal. Not one.
Walrus people, get on it, folks. Kate Baker made those, and they are beautiful and wonderful things, and she's a beautiful, wonderful person. So, yeah.
Also, Call of Cthulhu is a great game that lots of people talk about playing one day. This is your chance. If the Chaosium version isn't to your liking, I do like the Chaosium version, but it can be a bear of a system sometimes.
Yeah.
Trail of Cthulhu is a wonderful alternative system to play similar storylines. That's based off the Sleuth system, which is a more investigative focus, detective style approach to the characters instead of a combat focus.
Yeah. Cypher does really good Cthulhu stuff. Also,
all these are orc signers, by the way.
Yeah, they are. I don't know. There's even like weird genre hacks like Octoon Cthulhu, I think was the thing.
Oh yeah, Octoon Cthulhu.
Yeah, that one's pretty interesting. I'm going to talk about your favorite for a second, because I think you still might be able to find that humble bundle for Rifts, because you just love Palladium so much.
Hey, Rift's a game you can play.
Yeah,
that's a game you can play.
I'm just going to point out it also has a Savage Worlds conversion if you want.
Sure does.
More
Savage Worlds Rift's a game I might even recommend you play.
But it has a whole blend, and you can use all your minis from every game for it. So you can have robot spider walkers and glitter boy and jet knights fighting next to dragons. It's great. But yeah, that original system it is a labor of love to play.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and also like there's hundreds of RPGs out in the world. Um, Burning Wheel, if you want some Game of Thrones style
Oh,
political
sure, sure.
awesomeness, is a great system. I do not know how many systems I could rattle off here, honestly.
Well, I'm
So
gonna harp about my favorite thing to harp about in the STL space
what's this?
for gaming. I still don't have enough superhero minis.
Yeah, there's not a ton of superhero minis out in the world.
I'm always going and getting stuff from cyberpunk sets because it's the closest thing there is, and it's not good enough. I want capes and I beams and power effects. I want the whole thing. 'Cause I think a flying guy shooting eye rays, that the eye rays blowing up something are actually his base. That would be so neat.
Mhm.
It could be done. I believe in you.
Crisis Protocol's done some really creative things with the bases, like
Yeah,
Magneto floating in midair because of all the crap he's floating with is great.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, oh, David Wickham's talks about Traveler. Traveler's a great game, and also has official STL support. Hey, do you know another company that just launched official STL support for their RPG?
Who's that?
Ulysses Spiel. If you don't know who Ulysses Spiel is, they are a RPG company out of Germany that publishes a lot of Europe's best games, and
Mm.
the most popular games out of Europe. The most popular is probably The Dark Eye, which is like one of the oldest and most well established fantasy RPGs that exists because of the Cold War, and it was very difficult to import things from America like Dungeons and Dragons. But RPGs are fun. So the Dark Eye exists and got popular and is a fun game system to run.
It's always looked
They
interesting.
Yeah. Right now they are doing Torg Eternity, which is a kind of sci fantasy hack kind of game system. They're doing
I love Torque.
a tribe for this for only $5 a month with a great starter pack and a lot of great models. I'm gonna pull them up here in a second. Here we go.
While you're pulling them up, C27 Lord Nova said C27 makes great superhero model minis. They do.
Well, then you check
They're
them
one
out.
of the few that do, but I totally agree. They're great.
So like we've got very Shadowrunny like future fantasy.
You didn't
mashup
tell me this
characters.
tribe was going to be Torg specific.
Yes, you play Torg.
I have played Torg, and more importantly, Ron Lundeen, who is an amazing person and a cool creator, is obsessed with it, and I think wrote some of that newer stuff. And hearing Ron talk about Torg makes me want to play it so bad every time you talk about it. And I've only played it a couple times.
Awesome. And so they have asked to come on the show. We're still arranging that so hopefully we'll get a chance to interview them. They will have that will be an episode not to miss, because getting good interviews from Ulysses Spiel in English is rare and few and far between. It is a massive, important part of the RPG history that they're responsible for. They're also Germany's publisher for Pathfinder and Savage Worlds, two of the games we've just harped on how much we love. And so, hey, this is going to be awesome. Plus, it's a major player joining the 3D printing side of things and actually putting STLs out in the market. And honestly, this is I do want more game companies to look at this, because getting your entire unique bespoke miniature line manufactured in China and shipped over here, or even buying a COcast machine and getting it printed that way, is a big investment. Whereas hiring a few artists to put together an STL line for your bespoke game and releasing that out into the wild, and maybe even doing some only game runs or getting a print farm together to print like small print run batches, is much easier. And when a RPG has model support, it is much more likely that people will adopt it, because I cannot tell you how hard it is to I want to play this cool game. I want to play Um, no, hold on, Lady Blackbird, but I don't have minis for those characters or the ship or whatever. And I would have to custom scratch all this stuff or just substitute uh in models from my fantasy range, and it just doesn't fit the aesthetic. Whereas, if I was playing Torg, I just suddenly got a whole wealth of models for $5 that is going to make it much more likely that I will use them. I remember when I was a Pathfinder or Starfinder player, and those very first Reaper minis that came out that were like the official minis, I gobbled that crap up right away because it's like,
Yeah.
aha, I'm finally getting to rep my game. I'm finally, things are looking on my table like they're supposed to look, and not just how Wizards of the Coast decided they looked when I got these pre-painted plastics
Right.
from a different company.
Absolutely. I am hype. Now that you know it's Torque, I'm even more excited. I was excited before, but
Yeah, so this launched very recently. They contacted us, so we haven't had much time to dig into it. But hey, hopefully we'll have them on the show very soon. Oh gosh. Speaking of superheroes, big news. Photosmint, which is a statue and bust sculptor that's very popular in the 3D printing world, has announced that they are making all of their fan art free. They're putting all their fan out for free to download, whereas before a lot of this stuff was locked behind the Patreon paywall. Which means suddenly there is a gigantic library of awesome superhero and movies and video game inspired stuff that is out there to check out. So do go check out their free library. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. They are still producing original art pieces on Patreon, and also please consider supporting them on Patreon if you like what they make, because artists need to eat in order to continue to make art. But it's very clear here that the stuff that they're making free are their fan art, and fan art and 3D printing. This is a interesting cross section and probably worth its own episode, if I'm being honest with it. Where indeed, creating something in 3D sculpting used to be, you would go to ArtStation, you would look, oh, somebody made a 3D version of my favorite character. Right. Ain't that cool? And it's just like somebody drew it in oil or oil painted it, and fan art was fan art. Now fan art, and where fan art begins with 3D printing and product begins, that line is very blurry at the moment. And I can understand that that's going to be some interesting stuff in the future. And so where the industry seems to be trying to draw the line is, and where the line is what we're seeing here with Photosmint, where the fan art stuff is free, not charging for the stuff. And if you go to Cults, and you can get Warhammer fan art minis that are free, and that seems to be the line that is being supported. Whereas the second you start charging for it,
had some fan art in it.
Huh?
My paint workshop might have had some fan art options.
Yes. And the second you start charging money for it, the fan art tag might still apply, but that's when the grumpiness comes in. I know, like, Marvel Comics famously had their $1 license that you could get to do fan art officially and sell it at conventions if you were an illustrator. GW does not have that license.
No, they do not.
So it's an interesting thing. So I'm glad that we're seeing these statues are more amazing than any product that has been available for these lines. Photosmint is incredible. Their God of War stuff is amazing in particular. I do love that. They've done just about every superhero you can think of. And the world is a better place that they're in it, and that they're making this art, and that it exists. And where it's available as free fan art that you can 3D print, I think that that's really great. And I do not want to see what happens in a potential future where this is no longer possible because of that line gets too blurred. So I do applaud the effort here to try to put that line in the sand, at least tangibly.
Corporation enforced their license to make more money. It's like a story we keep hearing. Anyway, really quick, I know I've been talking about it, but I don't want people to miss out on early bird stuff. So Whispering Woods from Monolith Arts starts this week. There's free stuff and early bird pricing, and also the Fantastic Portals thing there. That's from same people who do Print Your Monsters and Fantastic Plants and Rocks. But yes, there's freebies and good discounting prices if you jump on now.
And if you want to find more of our wonderful content, you can do so over at printyourgames.com, where you'll find links to all the stuffs, including how to reach out to us. If you want, you can also find us on Spotify and iTunes, and to help the show out, the best way you can is to give us a good review on those platforms. If you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the algorithm help us reach more people, and the more fans out there printing stuff and participating in games, the better. Until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
I'm Prison Swords, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't forget to use your screen protector.